The Copa del Rey has long been a competition where Spanish football's deepest traditions collide with its most modern ambitions. A tournament that regularly reminds the sport's global giants that prestige alone does not guarantee an easy night's work. When FC Barcelona traveled to the Estadio Pedro Escartín to face Deportivo Guadalajara, the fixture looked, on paper, like a routine assignment. A powerhouse of European football against a lower division side, a mismatch that history suggests should resolve itself quickly and decisively. But the reality of the Copa del Rey, time and again, proves far more complex. This was not just another match on Barcelona's crowded calendar. It was a test of patience, professionalism, and respect for the competition itself. For Guadalajara, the occasion represented something altogether different. Hosting Barcelona is a rare event, a moment that defines seasons and careers for players who spend much of their professional lives away from the spotlight. The weeks leading up to the match were filled with anticipation across the city, as supporters prepared for a night that promised intensity, emotion, and the possibility, however slim, of witnessing one of football's great upsets. The stands were expected to be full, the atmosphere charged with belief and defiance. As Guadalajara embraced the role of underdog with pride rather than fear, Barcelona arrived with a squad shaped by rotation, necessity, and strategy. The modern football calendar leaves little room for sentimentality, and the Copa del Rey often becomes the stage where managers balance risk and reward. Resting key players while maintaining enough quality to avoid embarrassment is a delicate equation, one that has undone many elite clubs in the past. For Barcelona's coaching staff, the match was an opportunity to test squad depth. Give minutes to players on the fringes, and maintain momentum without overburdening stars expected to carry the club across multiple competitions. Yet, beneath the tactical decisions, lay a deeper narrative. Barcelona's identity has always been tied to control, possession, and aesthetic dominance. But knockout football has a way of challenging those ideals, or smaller pitches, against compact defenses and teams fueled by emotion. The beautiful game often becomes messy, physical, and unpredictable. Guadalajara's approach was never going to be about matching Barcelona pass for pass. Instead, it was about resilience, discipline, and seizing moments when complacency or frustration might creep into the visiting side's performance. As kickoff approached, the contrast between the two clubs could not have been sharper. Barcelona, with its global fan base and storied history, carried the weight of expectation not only to win, but to do so convincingly. Anything less than a clear victory would be dissected, criticized, and framed as evidence of deeper issues. Guadalajara, on the other hand, had everything to gain and little to lose. A respectable performance alone would be celebrated, while a glory, even a competitive defeat, could be cherished as a victory in spirit. The stadium reflected this emotional imbalance. Every touch by a Guadalajara player was met with encouragement, every defensive clearance greeted like a goal. Barcelona's warm-up routines unfolded under a mix of curiosity and hostility. Reminders that prestige means little once the whistle blows. In these moments, football strips itself of hierarchy, reducing the contest to 90 minutes, where effort, belief, and execution determine fate. From a tactical perspective, the early signs suggested a familiar pattern. Barcelona expected to dominate possession, dictate tempo, and gradually wear down their opponents. Guadalajara prepared to defend deep, close passing lanes and force Barcelona wide, where crosses could be contested and cleared. This was not a strategy born of fear, but of realism or recognition that survival depended on denying space and rhythm. To one of the most technically gifted teams in the world, what made the encounter particularly compelling was the psychological dimension. For Barcelona, impatience would be the greatest enemy. The longer the scoreline remained level, the louder the crowd would grow, feeding Guadalajara's confidence and increasing pressure on the visitors. For the home side, discipline was paramount. One lapse in concentration, one poorly timed challenge or misjudged clearance, could unravel an evening's worth of effort. As the players took their positions, the sense of occasion was unmistakable. This was the Copa del Rey in its purest form. Tradition meeting ambition, hierarchy confronting defiance. Teo knew that progression was non-negotiable. Guadalajara knew that belief, for one night at least, was enough to level the playing field emotionally, if not technically. This stage was set for a contest that promised to reveal not just the outcome of a match, but the character of both teams under pressure. When the referee's whistle finally cut through the noise, the narrative shifted from anticipation to action. The early moments would offer clues about Barcelona's composure and Guadalajara's resolve, setting the tone for a match that would test patience, bravery, and ultimately, quality. Immediately establish control of the ball, circulating possession across the back line and into midfield with methodical patience. Guadalajara retreated into a compact defensive shape, allowing Barcelona to have the ball in non-dangerous areas while focusing their energy on closing central spaces. The contrast in intent was clear. Barcelona sought dominance through possession, while Guadalajara sought survival through structure. The early rhythm of the game was defined by caution rather than creativity. Barcelona's passes were crisp and accurate, but largely horizontal, probing without penetrating. Guadalajara's players moved as a unit, shuffling laterally and communicating constantly, ensuring that no Barcelona attacker received the ball between the lines with time to turn. Each interception and clearance from the home side was met with roars of approval, reinforcing their belief that discipline could frustrate even the most technically refined opponents. As the minutes passed, Barcelona began to push higher up the pitch, compressing Guadalajara into their own half. Fullbacks advanced aggressively, attempting to stretch the defensive line and create overloads out wide. Crosses were delivered into the penalty area, but Guadalajara's centre-backs responded with authority, timing their jumps well and clearing danger before it could develop. The home side's goalkeeper remained largely untested, but his presence and organization added an extra layer of confidence to the defensive effort. Guadalajara's approach in possession was pragmatic. Rather than attempting to build from the back under pressure, they opted for direct passes toward the flanks or into channels, hoping to relieve pressure and draw fouls. These moments were brief but significant, serving as reminders that Barcelona could not afford to lose concentration. A misplaced pass or a poorly timed challenge could invite chaos, and Guadalajara were eager to capitalize on any lapse. The crowd played an increasingly influential role as the half wore on. Each successful defensive action heightened the sense of collective effort, transforming routine clearances into symbolic victories. Barcelona, accustomed to dictating the emotional tempo of matches, found themselves confronting a wall of noise that grew louder with every minute the score remained level. The psychological strain was subtle but real, manifesting in rushed decisions and occasional frustration. Midway through the first half, Barcelona enjoyed their most promising sequence of play. A quick exchange of passes through midfield momentarily disrupted Guadalajara's shape, creating a narrow window for a forward run into the box. The resulting shot, however, lacked conviction and was comfortably dealt with by the goalkeeper. The opportunity served as both encouragement and warning. Barcelona could break through, but only if precision matched ambition. Guadalajara responded not with panic, but with renewed discipline. Their defensive line held firm. Midfielders tracked runners tirelessly, and the gaps Barcelona sought to exploit closed almost as soon as they appeared. Home side's commitment to the cause was total, each player willing to sacrifice personal comfort for collective resistance. In these moments, the gulf in resources between the two clubs seemed irrelevant, replaced by a shared understanding of purpose. As halftime approached, the tempo of the game began to shift. Barcelona increased the urgency of their passing, attempting to quicken the pace and draw Guadalajara out of their defensive shell. The home side resisted, refusing to be lured into unnecessary pressure. Instead, they maintained their shape, content to absorb wave after wave of possession and wait for the referee's whistle to signal a successful first half. The final minutes before the break encapsulated the broader narrative of the opening 45 minutes. Barcelona pressed forward, dominating territory and possession, yet struggling to convert control into clear chances. Guadalajara defended with heart and organization, their belief growing with each passing second. When the referee finally signaled halftime, the scoreboard remained unchanged. A reflection not of Barcelona's superiority, but of Guadalajara's resilience. As the players left the field, the contrast in emotions was stark. Barcelona's body language hinted at frustration and urgency, an understanding that patience alone would not be enough. Guadalajara, meanwhile, walked toward the tunnel with heads held high, buoyed by the knowledge that they had matched Barcelona's intensity and denied them the breakthrough they sought. The first half had not produced goals, but it had produced tension, belief, and the unmistakable sense that the second half would demand even more from both sides.
The second half began with a subtle but noticeable shift in Barcelona's approach, signaling an awareness that control alone would not be sufficient to break Guadalajara's resistance. The tempo increased almost immediately, with quicker ball circulation and more purposeful movement off the ball. Where the first half had been defined by patience bordering on caution, opening minutes after the restart carried a sense of urgency that reflected both tactical instruction and psychological necessity. Barcelona understood that the longer the deadlock persisted, the more belief would grow in the home side and the crowd that fueled them. Guadalajara, however, showed no intention of abandoning the discipline that had served them so well. Their defensive structure remained intact, lines compact and communication constant. The midfield continued to screen the back line effectively, cutting off passing lanes and forcing Barcelona into wider areas. What changed, however, was the physical demand of sustaining such intensity. As Barcelona increased the speed of play, Guadalajara's players were required to react faster, cover more ground, and make decisions under greater pressure. Barcelona's fullbacks pushed even higher, effectively pinning Guadalajara's wingers deep and transforming the match into a near-constant siege. Crosses became more frequent, though still largely ineffective, as Guadalajara's defenders anticipated deliveries and attacked the ball with conviction. Each clearance, however, came at a cost. The home side found it increasingly difficult to relieve pressure, with their brief forays forward ending almost as soon as they began. Possession turnovers became more common, inviting yet another wave of Barcelona attacks. The crowd, so vocal in the first half, now oscillated between encouragement and anxious anticipation. Every defensive stand was celebrated, but the sense that Barcelona were edging closer to a breakthrough was impossible to ignore. The noise grew sharper, more urgent, as if collective belief could compensate for mounting fatigue. In these moments, the emotional stakes of the Copa del Rey were laid bare, a reminder that knockout football is as much a mental battle as it is a physical one. Barcelona's coaching staff responded with calculated adjustments. Subtle positional changes introduced greater fluidity in attack, with midfielders drifting wider and forwards dropping deeper to create numerical advantages. The goal was clear: disrupt Guadalajara's defensive reference points and force individual decisions rather than collective reactions. For brief moments, the strategy appeared to work, as Barcelona found pockets of space that had been unavailable in the first half. At the final touch, the decisive pass or shot continued to elude them. As the match crossed the hour mark, frustration became a visible factor for Barcelona. Passes were played with greater urgency, but less composure, and attempts from distance began to replace the patient build-up that had characterized earlier phases. These efforts rarely troubled the goalkeeper, but they served as indicators of mounting pressure, both on the pitch and on the minds of the players tasked with delivering a result. Guadalajara's resolve, though admirable, began to show signs of strain. Defensive clearances lacked the distance they once had, and second balls increasingly fell to Barcelona players. The home side's midfielders, tireless in the first half, now found themselves a step slower, arriving just late enough to allow Barcelona to recycle possession and maintain territorial dominance. Each minute without a goal felt like a victory for Guadalajara, but each minute also drained their physical and emotional reserves. The turning point did not arrive suddenly, but gradually, through accumulation rather than brilliance. Barcelona's sustained pressure forced Guadalajara deeper and deeper, reducing their ability to contest duels higher up the pitch. The match became a test of endurance, a question of whether collective resistance could withstand relentless quality. For Barcelona, the belief remained that one goal would change everything. Opening spaces and breaking the psychological barrier that Guadalajara had constructed. As the final quarter hour approached, the tension inside the stadium was palpable. Barcelona sensed opportunity, while Guadalajara sensed danger. The rhythm of the game quickened, not through chaotic exchanges, but through the inevitability of confrontation. Every corner, every free kick, every loose ball inside the penalty area carried heightened significance. The kind of moments that define cup competitions and linger in memory long after the final whistle. The opening goal, when it came, felt less like a surprise and more like the culmination of sustained pressure. It was the moment when resistance finally gave way, when structure could no longer compensate for exhaustion. For Guadalajara, it was a heartbreaking reward for bravery that had held firm for so long. For Barcelona, it was a release, a confirmation that persistence, even when unconvincing, can still prevail. The moment that ultimately defined the match arrived not with sudden brilliance, but with the quiet inevitability that follows prolonged pressure. For more than 70 minutes, Guadalajara had resisted Barcelona's advances through organization, commitment, and belief. Yet football, particularly at this level, has a way of rewarding persistence. And Barcelona's breakthrough came as the natural consequence of their sustained dominance rather than a moment of improvisational genius. The sequence began with Barcelona once again recycling possession deep in Guadalajara's half, probing patiently as the home side retreated ever closer to their own penalty area. A wide delivery was partially cleared, but not decisively enough to relieve danger. The ball fell kindly for Barcelona, who immediately reasserted control, shifting play to exploit Guadalajara's increasingly narrow defensive shape. What had once been a compact, well-drilled unit now showed signs of fragmentation, not through lack of effort, but through exhaustion. As the ball was worked back into a crossing position, Barcelona committed numbers forward, sensing that this moment carried greater significance than those that had come before. Guadalajara's defenders reacted instinctively, dropping toward their goal line, prioritizing coverage over confrontation. In doing so, they ceded just enough space for the delivery to be made with precision, rather than desperation. The cross arced into the penalty area, bypassing the first line of defense and forcing a moment of decision inside the 6-yard box. It was here that Barcelona finally found their opening. Andreas Christensen, often more associated with defensive solidity than attacking contribution, rose above his marker with perfect timing. His movement was subtle but decisive, a half-step gained through anticipation rather than pace. As the ball met his forehead, the collective breath of the stadium seemed to pause. The contact was clean, directing the ball toward goal with enough power to test the goalkeeper, but enough placement to evade his reach. The reaction was immediate and visceral. For Barcelona, the goal represented relief more than celebration. An emotional release after a prolonged struggle. Players raised their arms not in exuberance, but in affirmation, as if confirming to themselves that persistence had not been in vain. For Guadalajara, the moment was devastating. Heads dropped, hands went to hips, and the weight of what they had resisted for so long suddenly bore down with full force. The crowd, which had been the 12th man throughout the night, fell into a brief, stunned silence before erupting in applause that acknowledged both the quality of the goal and the effort that had preceded it. There was disappointment, certainly, but also pride. Guadalajara had not been undone by carelessness or fear, but by a single moment where quality met opportunity. In the minutes that followed, the dynamics of the match shifted dramatically. Barcelona, now in the lead, played with greater freedom, their passes flowing with renewed confidence. The psychological barrier that had constrained their creativity appeared to lift, replaced by a sense of control that had been missing despite their dominance in possession. Guadalajara, conversely, faced a dilemma. Continuing to defend deep, would almost certainly invite further pressure. But pushing forward in search of an equalizer risked exposing spaces that Barcelona were well equipped to exploit. The immediate aftermath of the goal tested Guadalajara's character. Rather than collapsing, they attempted to respond with intent, pushing slightly higher up the pitch and committing more players forward. This change, though brave, introduced an element of risk that had been largely absent from their performance until that point. For the first time in the match, Barcelona found themselves attacking into open spaces rather than compact lines, a scenario that suited their technical strengths perfectly. Barcelona's midfield began to dictate proceedings with greater authority, controlling not just possession but tempo. The ball moved quicker, decisions were made with greater clarity, and the sense of inevitability that had preceded the goal now worked in their favor. Guadalajara continued to fight, but the emotional and physical toll of the evening was evident. Every sprint required more effort. Every challenge carried more consequence. The goal did more than change the scoreline. It redefined the narrative of the match. What had been a story of resistance and belief became one of survival and damage limitation. Guadalajara's players understood that their margin for error had vanished, while Barcelona sensed that the contest, though not yet finished, was now firmly within their grasp. As the clock ticked on, the question was no longer whether Barcelona would assert their quality, but how decisively they would do so. The opening goal had cracked the foundation of Guadalajara's resistance, and in cup football, such cracks rarely remain isolated. Momentum once gained tends to compound, and Barcelona were now in a position to capitalize fully. With the deadlock finally broken, the final phase of the match unfolded under a markedly different emotional and tactical landscape. Barcelona, liberated by their breakthrough, no longer played with the hesitation that had defined much of the evening. Instead, they shifted into a mode of calculated control, balancing possession with the awareness that Guadalajara, now chasing the game, would inevitably leave spaces behind. The tempo was no longer driven by urgency, but by assurance, a clear sign that Barcelona believed the contest had tilted irreversibly in their favor. Guadalajara's response was admirable in intent, if not in execution. The home side pushed higher up the pitch, committing additional players forward in search of an equalizer that would restore belief and prolong the dream. This adjustment, however, came at a cost. The compact defensive structure that had frustrated Barcelona for more than an hour began to unravel, replaced by stretched lines and isolated duels. What had once been a collective effort became increasingly individual, as fatigue and emotional strain tested the limits of discipline. Barcelona's midfield exploited this shift with ruthless efficiency. Passes were now played vertically as often as they were played laterally, drawing Guadalajara out of position and forcing defenders into uncomfortable decisions. Each transition forward carried danger, not necessarily because Barcelona attacked with reckless abandon, but because they attacked with clarity. The ball moved faster, the off-the-ball runs became more purposeful, and the confidence that accompanies a lead in knockout football became unmistakable. As the clock wound down, Guadalajara's moments of possession became fewer and more desperate. Long balls replaced structured build-up, and hopeful crosses substituted for carefully constructed attacks. While these efforts were greeted enthusiastically by the crowd, they rarely troubled Barcelona's defensive line, which responded with composure and experience. The sense of inevitability grew stronger with each passing minute, not through arrogance, but through the quiet authority of a team accustomed to closing out matches under pressure. The second goal, when it arrived in the final moments, served as confirmation rather than revelation. Barcelona transitioned quickly from defense to attack, exploiting the open spaces left by Guadalajara's forward push. A precise pass found Marcus Rashford in stride, his movement timed perfectly to beat the defensive line. With the goalkeeper advancing to narrow the angle, Rashford remained composed, guiding his finish with the assurance of a player well aware of the moment's significance. The ball found the net, and with it, the contest was effectively decided. The reaction to the second goal was telling. Barcelona's players celebrated with measured satisfaction, aware that the objective had been achieved, but respectful of the effort required to do so. Guadalajara's players, though visibly disappointed, were met with applause from the stands, recognition of a performance that had exceeded expectations and embodied the spirit of the competition. In defeat there was dignity, and in victory there was relief. The final minutes played out with Barcelona in complete control, circulating possession and limiting risk. Guadalajara continued to press, driven more by pride than realistic hope. But the outcome was no longer in doubt. When the referee's whistle finally signaled the end of the match, the scoreline read Guadalajara 0, Barcelona 2. A result that reflected quality and persistence rather than dominance from start to finish. For Barcelona, the victory secured progression in the Copa del Rey and reinforced the importance of patience and professionalism in knockout football. It was not a performance that would be remembered for spectacle, but one that underscored the value of composure when facing determined opposition. For Guadalajara, the match represented a night to be remembered. A demonstration that belief and organization can challenge even the most formidable opponents, if only for a time. As players exchanged handshakes and supporters lingered in the stands, the narrative of the evening crystallized. This was a match defined not by early fireworks, but by endurance, resolve, and the gradual assertion of quality. The Copa del Rey had once again delivered a story where the underdog stood tall. The favorite endured scrutiny, and football reminded everyone why these contests continued to captivate. Beyond the goals and the final scoreline, the match offered a revealing study in individual responsibility and collective structure. For Barcelona, this was not a night defined by flair or attacking excess, but by players embracing roles that demanded patience, intelligence, and emotional control. In many ways, the performance reflected a mature understanding of what knockout football requires when the opponent refuses to yield easily. At the heart of Barcelona's breakthrough stood Andreas Christensen, whose contribution extended far beyond the decisive goal. Throughout the match, he embodied calm and positional awareness, stepping forward to intercept loose balls and recycling possession when Guadalajara attempted to clear their lines. His goal, while technically a defensive player's moment, symbolized the collective nature of Barcelona's persistence. It was not a striker's instinct or a moment of individual brilliance that broke the deadlock, but the arrival of a defender who read the moment perfectly and acted with conviction. Marcus Rashford's impact, though brief in terms of time on the scoresheet, was no less significant. His late goal carried the authority of a player comfortable with pressure, capable of making decisive contributions even in matches that offer little space or rhythm. Rashford's movement in the closing stages reflected an understanding of when to hold with and when to attack central spaces, a balance that allowed Barcelona to exploit Guadalajara's stretched defensive shape. His composure in front of goal, particularly in a moment designed to extinguish any lingering doubt, reinforced his value in matches where margins are slim. Barcelona's midfield performance was perhaps the most telling indicator of the team's mindset. Rather than seeking constant vertical penetration, the midfield prioritized control, recycling possession patiently and denying Guadalajara opportunities to counterattack. This approach, while at times frustrating for spectators craving urgency, proved essential in maintaining territorial dominance and wearing down resistance. The ability to remain disciplined, even when chances were scarce, underscored a maturity that is often tested most severely in cup competitions. From a tactical perspective, Barcelona's use of width played a decisive role over the course of the match. While early crosses were frequently repelled, their cumulative effect gradually pulled Guadalajara's defensive shape wider and deeper. Fullbacks overlapping consistently forced Guadalajara's wingers into defensive duties, reducing their ability to contribute offensively and further isolating the home side's forward players. This slow erosion of structure, rather than any sudden tactical masterstroke, laid the foundation for the breakthrough. Guadalajara's individual performances, meanwhile, deserved recognition for their intensity and discipline. The defensive line, in particular, executed its responsibilities with remarkable consistency for much of the match. Clearances were well-timed, positioning was disciplined, and communication remained constant, even as fatigue set in. The goalkeeper's presence added confidence, commanding the penalty area and making routine saves look assured. Though ultimately beaten twice, his performance symbolized the collective effort that allowed Guadalajara to compete on equal emotional footing with a far more resourced opponent. The midfield battle was where Guadalajara's limitations became most apparent as the match wore on. Early energy and commitment gave way to physical exhaustion, and the inability to retain possession for extended periods proved costly. Each turnover invited renewed pressure, creating a cycle that became increasingly difficult to escape. This was not a failure of intent, but a reflection of the physical demands imposed by sustained defending against elite opposition. Tactically, Guadalajara's game plan was sound and executed with admirable discipline. By denying central spaces and forcing Barcelona wide, they minimized the risk of being undone by intricate passing moves through the heart of their defense. However, the absence of a consistent outlet in attack meant that defensive phases were rarely followed by meaningful recovery periods. Over time, this imbalance took its toll, highlighting a fundamental reality of football at this level. Defending well is essential, but relief through possession is equally critical. For Barcelona, the match offered valuable lessons ahead of future knockout fixtures. The ability to remain composed under frustration, to trust structure over impulse, and to accept that some matches require endurance rather than expression will serve them well as the competition progresses. While questions may linger about creativity and efficiency, the result reaffirmed that professionalism and patience remain powerful tools in cup football. As the dust settled on the evening, the individual and tactical narratives converged into a single truth. This was a match won, not through dominance alone, but through belief in process. Barcelona trusted that persistence would be rewarded. Guadalajara trusted that organization could bridge the gap in quality. In the end, quality prevailed, but not without being tested, and not without leaving behind a story that extended far beyond the final scoreline. As the stadium gradually emptied, and the immediate emotion of competition began to fade, attention shifted from the pitch to the voices tasked with interpreting what the match had meant. In the mixed zone and press conference rooms, reactions from both camps revealed contrasting emotional landscapes shaped by expectation and experience. For Barcelona, the mood was measured, professional, and quietly relieved. For Guadalajara, it was reflective, proud, and tinged with the frustration of having come so close to extending an extraordinary night. Barcelona's coaching staff framed the result as an example of maturity rather than spectacle. Emphasis was placed on patience, control, and the importance of respecting every opponent in knockout football. The narrative was not about dominance or superiority, but about navigating adversity without panic. In a competition where favorites are routinely undone by impatience and complacency, Barcelona's ability to remain faithful to their structure was presented as a positive sign of evolution rather than a cause for concern. Players echoed this sentiment in their post-match comments, repeatedly returning to the theme of composure. Several spoke of the difficulty in breaking down a well-organized defense and acknowledged Guadalajara's discipline and effort. The recognition of the opponent's performance was not perfunctory. It carried genuine appreciation for the challenge posed. In doing so, Barcelona reinforced the idea that progress in the Copa del Rey often demands humility as much as talent. Andreas Christensen's goal naturally became a focal point of discussion, though he was quick to deflect attention from individual praise. His comments centered on collective movement, sustained pressure, and the belief that opportunities would eventually come if the team maintained its principles. This framing aligned perfectly with the broader narrative Barcelona sought to project. A team defined by structure and patience rather than reliance on moments of individual brilliance. Marcus Rashford, whose late goal sealed the result, spoke in similarly understated terms. He emphasized the importance of timing and decision-making in matches where space is limited and chances are rare. His perspective highlighted an understanding that such games are often decided by a single transition or moment of clarity, and that being mentally prepared for those moments is as important as physical readiness. On the other side, Guadalajara's reactions reflected a mixture of pride and regret. The coaching staff praised their players for executing the game plan with discipline and courage, emphasizing that the performance embodied everything the club represents. There was no attempt to frame the result as a missed opportunity in terms of expectation, but rather as a demonstration of competitiveness on a national stage. For a club operating far from the spotlight of top-tier football, the match represented validation of effort and identity. Players from Guadalajara spoke openly about the emotional toll of defending for such long stretches and the difficulty of maintaining concentration against a team that rarely stops probing. While disappointment was evident, So too was satisfaction in having pushed one of the world's most storied clubs deep into the match without conceding. The applause from supporters at full time was frequently cited as a moment that transcended the result, reinforcing the connection between team and community. Media reaction mirrored these dual narratives. National outlets framed the match as another example of the Copa del Rey's enduring capacity to challenge football's hierarchy. Headlines focused not only on Barcelona's progression, but on Guadalajara's resistance and the reminder that prestige offers no shortcuts in knockout competitions. Analysis pieces highlighted Barcelona's lack of fluidity while simultaneously acknowledging the difficulty of facing a motivated, organized opponent on unfamiliar terrain. Pundits debated whether Barcelona's performance should inspire confidence or concern. Some viewed the narrow victory as evidence of resilience and maturity, arguing that such matches often serve as crucial building blocks in successful cup campaigns. Others questioned the lack of creativity and urgency, suggesting that sterner tests lie ahead and that patience alone may not suffice against opponents with greater attacking threat. Within this broader discourse, one theme remained constant: respect for the competition. The match reinforced the idea that the Copa del Rey is not merely a platform for showcasing elite talent, but a crucible where preparation, mentality, and adaptability are tested. Barcelona passed that test, albeit without flourish. Guadalajara, though eliminated, emerged with enhanced reputation and renewed belief in their methods. As the story of the match settled into the collective memory, it became clear that its significance extended beyond the scoreline. For Barcelona, it was a reminder that progress often requires endurance and humility. For Guadalajara, it was proof that identity and organization can elevate a team beyond perceived limitations. And for Spanish football as a whole, it was another chapter in a competition defined by unpredictability, emotion, and the enduring romance of the underdog. To fully understand the significance of Barcelona's victory over Guadalajara, it is essential to place the match within the broader historical framework of the Copa del Rey. This competition, older than La Liga itself, has long served as Spanish football's most democratic stage, a tournament where hierarchy is tested and tradition carries equal weight to talent. For generations, the Copa del Rey has produced nights where the script was rewritten by belief, resilience, and the refusal of underdogs to accept predetermined outcomes. Barcelona's relationship with the Copa del Rey is deeply intertwined with the club's identity. As one of the competition's most successful participants, the club carries both privilege and burden into every fixture. Each appearance is framed by history, each victory measured against a legacy that includes iconic finals, dramatic comebacks, and moments of technical brilliance that have come to define eras. Yet history also records moments of vulnerability, nights when Barcelona's ambition was undone by complacency or underestimation of lesser-known opponents. It is precisely this duality that gives matches like the one against Guadalajara their meaning. On paper, the result will be remembered simply as progression, a 2-0 victory that secured a place in the next round. But within the context of the competition's history, it echoes countless encounters where Barcelona were forced to confront the reality that reputation offers no protection once the ball is in play. The Copa del Rey does not reward past success, it demands present focus. For Guadalajara, their place in this narrative carries a different weight. Clubs from lower divisions have historically defined the tournament's mythology, serving as reminders that football's romance lies not only in trophies but in moments of defiance. Hosting Barcelona placed Guadalajara within a lineage of teams who, for one night, became symbols of possibility. Their resistance, their organization, and their belief aligned them with countless predecessors who have used the Copa del Rey as a platform to challenge Spain's elite. Historically, Barcelona have learned that survival in this competition often requires adaptation. The ability to win without dominating aesthetically has become an increasingly important trait in modern cup football. In earlier eras, Barcelona's most celebrated cup triumphs were often accompanied by expressive, attacking football. More recent campaigns, however, have highlighted the importance of control, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to absorb pressure when momentum stalls. The Guadalajara match fits squarely within this evolving narrative. It was not a showcase of Barcelona's attacking heritage, but a demonstration of their ability to endure. The patience shown in maintaining structure, even as frustration mounted, reflected lessons learned from past disappointments. In this sense, the victory carried significance beyond immediate progression, suggesting a team more attuned to the psychological demands of knockout competition. The Copa del Rey's format, with its single-elimination ties and unpredictable venues, continues to shape these narratives. Unlike league football, where consistency over time determines success, cup football condenses pressure into isolated moments. One mistake, one lapse in concentration, can define a season. Barcelona's history is filled with examples of both triumph and heartbreak under these conditions, reinforcing the idea that each match represents a unique challenge rather than a routine step. For Guadalajara, participation alone added a chapter to the club's story. While elimination was inevitable for most underdogs, the manner of their performance ensured that the match would be remembered with pride. Their ability to remain competitive deep into the contest aligned with the Copa del Rey's enduring spirit, where courage and organization can elevate a team far beyond its usual environment. As Spanish football continues to evolve, the competition's relevance remains undiminished. The Copa del Rey offers a space where tradition confronts modernity, where global brands like Barcelona are reminded of their roots within a national football culture defined by diversity and unpredictability. Matches like this one serve as living reminders that football's power lies not only in outcomes, but in the journeys that lead to them. In this broader historical light, Barcelona's 2-0 victory over Guadalajara becomes more than a scoreline. It becomes part of a continuum, a moment where the past informed the present, and where respect for the competition shaped the approach to victory. The Copa del Rey once again fulfilled its role as a stage where identity, resilience, and belief intersect, leaving behind stories that endure long after the final whistle. With progression secured, Barcelona's attention inevitably turned toward what lies ahead in the Copa del Rey and beyond. While the victory over Guadalajara delivered the immediate reward of advancement, it also raised questions that extend far beyond a single fixture. Cup competitions are defined not only by who advances, but by how teams adapt from one challenge to the next, carrying lessons forward as the quality of opposition increases and margins become ever thinner. For Barcelona, the match served as a reminder that no fixture in the Copa del Rey can be treated as routine. Future rounds will bring opponents with greater technical quality, deeper squads, and more consistent attacking threats. Against such teams, the margin for prolonged inefficiency will narrow significantly. While patience and control proved sufficient against Guadalajara, Barcelona will need to complement those qualities with sharper execution and greater fluidity in the final third as the competition progresses. Strategically, the match reinforced the importance of squad depth and rotation. The Copa del Rey often arrives amid congested schedules, demanding careful management of player workloads. Barcelona's ability to rely on contributions from across the squad, including defenders and substitutes, highlighted a collective resilience that could prove decisive in later rounds. This depth allows the team to approach each fixture with flexibility, adapting both personnel and tactics to the specific demands of the opponent. The Guadalajara match also underscored the significance of emotional discipline. In cup football, frustration can be as dangerous as fatigue. Barcelona's capacity to maintain composure despite a prolonged lack of goals demonstrated a maturity that will be tested repeatedly as stakes rise. Future opponents may be less content to defend deep, introducing additional complexities that require not just patience, but rapid problem-solving and creative risk-taking. From a tactical perspective, Barcelona's emphasis on territorial control and width remains a central pillar of their identity. However, the match exposed areas where greater variation may be required. Reliance on crossing alone, particularly against compact defenses, risks predictability. Incorporating quicker combinations through central channels and encouraging more dynamic off-the-ball movement will be essential to breaking down opponents capable of matching Guadalajara's organization while offering more offensive threat. The psychological impact of the victory should not be underestimated. Cup campaigns often hinge on moments where teams learn to survive discomfort. Barcelona's experience in Guadalajara provided such a moment, reinforcing belief in process and structure. These experiences accumulate, shaping a team's collective confidence and preparing them for the unpredictable challenges that define knockout football. For Guadalajara, the implications of the match extend beyond immediate elimination. The performance offered a blueprint for future encounters against higher-level opposition, validating an approach rooted in discipline and collective effort. While the club's focus will return to league commitments, memory of competing on equal terms with Barcelona for much of the match will serve as a powerful reference point for players and supporters alike. The broader competitive landscape of the Copa del Rey ensures that Barcelona's path forward will be anything but straightforward. Traditional rivals, emerging contenders, and unpredictable underdogs all remain potential obstacles. Each round will demand renewed focus, adaptation, and respect for the competition's unique pressures. The Guadalajara match, in this sense, was both a test and a warning. Progression is never guaranteed, and complacency carries immediate consequences. As Barcelona move forward, the balance between ambition and realism will be crucial. The club's historical success in the Copa del Rey brings expectation, but expectation alone does not secure results. What will matter is the ability to apply lessons learned, to evolve tactically and emotionally, and to approach each fixture with the same seriousness displayed on a difficult night away from home. In the end, the match against Guadalajara may not define Barcelona's season, but it will inform it. Yes. It stands as a reminder that the journey through the Copa del Rey is rarely smooth, and that every step forward requires patience, adaptability, and respect for the opposition. These lessons, absorbed and applied, could ultimately shape the outcome of the campaign in ways that only become clear when the final chapters are written. As the lights dimmed over the Estadio Pedro Escartín and the echoes of the crowd gradually faded into memory, the true meaning of Guadalajara's encounter with Barcelona became clearer. This was not merely a match decided by 2 goals, or a routine step forward for a club accustomed to navigating the latter stages of cup competitions. Instead, it was a reminder of why football, at every level, continues to captivate audiences across generations. The scoreline told a story of quality prevailing, but the 90 minutes revealed something far richer, a contest shaped by belief, endurance, and mutual respect for the game. For Barcelona, the evening reinforced an enduring truth about elite football. Dominance does not always translate into immediacy, and superiority on paper does not guarantee comfort on the pitch. The ability to win when rhythm is elusive, when patience is tested, and when resistance refuses to yield easily, is often what separates successful cup campaigns from forgotten ones. This was a victory grounded in professionalism rather than spectacle, in structure rather than spontaneity, and in trust rather than urgency. The players understood this instinctively as the match unfolded. There was no panic when early chances failed to materialize, no reckless abandonment of structure in pursuit of a breakthrough. Instead, Barcelona leaned into their collective identity, trusting that sustained pressure, intelligent movement, and emotional control would eventually produce reward. When that moment arrived, it felt earned rather than dramatic, the product of accumulation rather than inspiration. Guadalajara's role in shaping this narrative cannot be overstated. Their performance embodied the spirit that has defined the Copa del Rey for more than a century. Organized, fearless, and unified. They transformed what might have been a forgettable fixture into a meaningful contest that demanded Barcelona's full attention. Their resistance did not rely on fortune or chaos, but on preparation, communication, and collective sacrifice. In doing so, they honored the competition and reminded all involved that football's magic often resides in its imbalance. The applause that greeted Guadalajara's players at full time spoke volumes. It was not merely appreciation for effort, but recognition of dignity in defeat. On a night when expectations leaned heavily in one direction, they challenged hierarchy with courage and left the pitch having expanded their own sense of possibility. For players and supporters alike, the experience will linger as a reference point, proof that belief, when matched with discipline, can elevate performance beyond circumstance. From a broader perspective, the match reaffirmed the Copa del Rey's unique place within Spanish football. In an era increasingly shaped by commercial priorities and global audiences, the competition continues to preserve the essence of the domestic game. Smaller stadiums, unfamiliar environments, and emotionally charged crowds ensure that tradition remains alive, forcing even the most decorated clubs to reconnect with the sport's grassroots realities. Barcelona's progression, while expected, was not automatic. It was earned through respect for the opponent, patience under pressure, and an understanding that cup football rewards those who embrace its unpredictability rather than resist it. These qualities, cultivated on nights like this, form the foundation upon which deeper runs are built. Whether or not this campaign ultimately ends in silverware, the lessons drawn from Guadalajara will inform the journey ahead. As the competition moves forward, new challenges will arise, each with its own narrative and demands. The Guadalajara match will not dominate headlines in the months to come, but it will remain etched within the season's fabric as a reminder of what it takes to survive and advance. In cup football, such nights often reveal more about a team's character than victories achieved with ease. When history looks back on this encounter, it will likely see a simple result: Guadalajara 0, Barcelona 2. But those who witnessed it will remember far more. They will remember resistance that refused to crumble, patience that refused to break, and a competition that once again delivered on its promise to surprise, challenge, and inspire. In the end, this was football in its most honest form. Not flawless, not overwhelming, but deeply human. And that, more than goals or trophies, is what ensures nights like this endure long after the final whistle has blown.